We begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Tzadi Beis. We begin 8 lines down at the top of the Yomim. We continue our look at the next Mishnah, continuing on the theme of the Chamisha Dvarim. We spoke about the Perek HaChovel is about someone injures someone else. So there's a 5 type of monetary liabilities: Nezek, Tzar, Ripui, Sheves, Baishas. There's all these different types of obligations. Our Mishnah then continues in the more agadic theme, and really the whole Daf is more agadic, and beginning with this emotional element. When you injure someone, that there's also mechila that's required. He has to pardon you, not just from the monetary aspect, but also from emotional, that the hurt that you did to him. Throughout the entire world. So discussing today's daf are even if the guy pays for the injuries, he's not pardoned until he asks him for mechila. The Gemara discusses, how do we know that if he doesn't pardon him, that he's considered a cruel person? The Gemara brings the incident between Abimelech and Sarah, which discusses and brings out this point that one has to be moichel. And the famous teaching: whoever needs, who asks for mercy on his friend, he needs that thing. That person is answered first. The Gemara brings many different interesting things that the Amri Inchi that people used to say, and how we have a source in the Torah for this idea. Which bahadi hutzi loki krava, if you're with the thorns, then the cabbage gets ruined too. Woe to the wicked, woe to his neighbor. Basa anya azlan yusa, that the poor get poorer. That although the wine belongs to the owner, but the thanks go to the one who pours it to you. If you have a pit that you drink water from, don't throw some dirt inside because you don't need it anymore. Leave it for people that do need it. When we were younger, we thought we were men. Now that we're older, we're like little children. A lot of interesting things that the Gemara is going to discuss and say, how do we know this idea from the Torah? So we begin the current Daf Tzadi Beis, 8 lines down with the Daf of the Yomid. We will continue our look at the next Mishnah, where Rashi points out that this Mishnah is a stama, it's anonymous, meaning it's not Rabbi Kiva, who we had quoted in the end of the previous Mishnah. This is going according to everyone. Says the Mishnah, even though the person who, the perpetrator, paid the victim the monetary payments for the damages that he had done to him. He paid for the doctor bills. He paid for the pain, the physical pain. He paid for the loss of work. He paid for the shame. He paid for the damage. He's not forgiven until he asks mechila to be pardoned from the victim. It says a pasuk in Bereshis. Hashem tells to Abimelech, "Vata now, Hoshev Eishes v'Gomer, return the wife of the man, because he's a prophet. He'll daven for you, and then you'll live. And if not, then you're going to die and everything that you have." So you see that even though there's the element of him davening for you, as the Gemara is going to elaborate, that you see that the person has to, in this case was Avraham Avinu, as Mashar explains, that he has to appease. Hashem instructed Abimelech to ask Avraham for forgiveness to the extent that Avraham would even daven for him. Continues the Mishnah, and where do we know that if, let's say, the victim is not Michael, the perpetrator, that Shehu Arzari is considered as cruel? Like it says in the pasuk later on, it says, "Veispal Avram Elo Elikim." Avram daven to Hashem. "V'yirpa Elikim es Abimelech v'goymer," and God healed Abimelech, etc. So we see that the appropriate thing to do, like Avram did, is to be Michael and even to daven for him, because if not, you consider it as an Achzer, as a cruel person. Continues the Mishnah. A related vein. If someone says, "Sama es einai," blind my eye, kata es yadi, cut off my hand, shibes ragli, break my leg. So Chayiv, even though he said that you should do it, if you do it, you're going to be liable. Let's say he said, "I'm a nas lifter, break my hand on the condition that you'll be exempt." The Gemara is going to explain exactly what this means. Chayiv, you're still going to be liable. Now, that's regarding the person's body. Let's take the same cases in regards to a person's money. Koches kasusi, tear my garment. Shabes kadi, break my jug. Chayiv, the guy who did it is still liable. If he says, "Do it, I'm not lifted," no, I want you to do it. You'll do it with the intention that you'll be exempt. Okay, pater, then the guy's exempt. You told him to smash your jug. You told him to tear your shirt. Now, finishes off the Mishnah. Asa came ish playing I'm not lifted. Let's say do it to that person on the condition that you'll be exempt. Oh, that's chayiv. Then you're liable. Money, whether it's his body, whether it's his money. You have no rights to tell him to do with someone else and to destroy either his body or his money. Now the Gemara brings a brisa, Tanabon, to elaborate on the halacha of the opening halacha of our Mishnah. Kol elu sha'amru, All these things that we said in the previous Mishnah is for the amount that you're liable for, a sela or mana or 200 or 400 zuz, like in the previous Mishnah that we spoke about, that you slap a guy, slap backhanded, all these different things, pull off the head covering. There's only demei b'shasai. There's only the monetary value of the shame, and that's why Rashi brought that this is not Rabbi Kiva, this Mishnah, even though the Gemara is explaining over here, because that was the end of the previous Mishnah. No, this is unrelated, even though the Gemara now is commenting on the previous Mishnah. That's only demei b'shasai, the money of a shame. But the pain that he worries regarding his shame, so this is really what it's related to our Mishnah, because there's the emotional element. There's the monetary payment of the shame, and then there's the emotional, the tsar the guy had because of the shame. Shame is a monetary liability, but then there's also. Where the mechila is regarding the. Is
it specifically referring to what the person is asking mechila for? What he has to ask for?
The perpetrator had injured the victim. The victim has to be asked for mechila for what was done to him.
Only this?
Yeah, I mean that's
not all that what was included in this.
What, like what? Meaning what else besides the
bushes,
Yeah, so this is going back on the previous Mishnah. The previous Mishnah that said that it's 100 or 200 or 400, that was only regarding the actual money of the shame itself. But Sairoi, the pain that he worries regarding his shame, even if the perpetrator brings all the karbanas, all the best quality rams in the world as karbanas, he's not going to be pardoned at Shivakashman until he actually asks the victim for his mechila. Shlomo says in the pasuk, and this is no, the shame was an experience, and that right. Rashi's words are shadoyig al beishasai. Right, when the word Sari says that he's worried on regarding his shame. No, shame is the experience of being embarrassed, of being exposed. Let's say that's one thing, and then there's like this emotional torment that you have, that you worry regarding the fact that you were shamed, and you're thinking about it. You can't get over it now. 9 o'clock at night, you're in your room and you're in bed and you're thinking, what? Could be. You have to know how to translate what Rashi means. No, the shame is the experience of the injury. Then you have PTSD, let's say. Let's say a guy was... No, I mean to say like the same thing like you want to say trauma, PTSD, like, the physical also, like you could injure yourself. And then there's like it keeps on... Right, for that's not monetary obligation, but that's what the Gemara is saying. You have to ask mechila for that. Shneimach says in the pasuk, and this is the pasuk we brought in the Mishnah, Hashiv Esha Se'ish, return the wife of the man, said Hashem to Avimelech, Kinavihu, because Abraham is a prophet, Bispal Badecha, and he'll daven for you. You see that it has to be, you have to beseech him so much, you have to entreat, and you have to be ask him mechila, he'll even daven for you that you should be healed. So you see that that's not enough just to pay back. You have to also ask mechila. Now, parenthetically, the Gemara asks, wait, the Eishes Navi Boy Aduri, the wife of a prophet, then you have to return. But Eishes Hachal Boy Aduri, well, he went and he kidnapped Sarah. So because her husband, the prophet, that's why the pasuk Hashem is telling him you have to return them. But if not, you wouldn't have to. Some of Shmuel ben Nachman says no. The way you have to translate the pasuk is like this: Hashiv Eishes Eish, return the wife of the man mikamakum. Any wife that you kidnap, you got to return. But now that you're saying, Hagoy gam tzadik tarig, Abimelech said to Hashem, I said, a nation or a Gentile that's also righteous, you're going to kill also? Meaning, what was his claim to Hashem? Was because Halayhu Amar li'achaisihi. He was telling to Hashem, he said, what do you want from me? He told me it's his sister. And she also said that he's her brother. That's what Hashem said. No. Nabihu, he's a prophet. Now, prophet doesn't only mean to say that he sees the future, meaning, the prophet understands, when a guest comes to town, what do you ask him regarding what he wants to eat, what he wants to drink, where he's dining? Or do you ask him when he comes to the town, regarding his wife? Is she your wife? Is she your sister? I mean, to say the questions they were asking were inappropriate. They were asking because they wanted Sarah because she was beautiful, and they were asking all these types of personal questions. What, he's going to go tell you? You're going to kill him because you want his wife. So he just says, "Oh, it's my sister," and they won't kill you then because then you're not in competition. From here we learn lebenoyach shenerag, and that's what it means that he's a navi, meaning he understood what you're really saying, and therefore, don't give me tiritzim that you're so righteous. And actually, from here we learn now for a Gentile shenerag he could get killed. That he should have learned derech eretz, and he didn't. Meaning from the fact that Hashem tells him he's a prophet, sounds like there's no substance to what you're saying, and you should have been killed for actually sleeping with this woman, trying to at least, because of the fact that this is inappropriate the way you were trying to ask when he came to town. Now, the pasuk over there says, once we bring this in, because we were talking about a guy, a perpetrator and a victim, and you have to ask for Mechila, which was the story of Avimelech with Avram and Sarah. So the pasuk tells us over there that Hashem closed up, ki otzer Hashem. Hashem closed up all the wombs of the house of Avimelech because of what was done to Sarah, that she was being held captive by him. So Amar Rabbi Elazar says, but why does it say a double terminology telling us that the wombs were closed up, that they couldn't give birth, is teaching us that there was more than one closing. Achas be'ish, meaning there was one regarding the men, which is shikva zera, that they couldn't release their semen. So that's regarding childbirth, that they couldn't release their semen. And shtayim be'isha, there were two by the women. Yet shikva zera, the semen that was in the woman's womb, she couldn't emit, she couldn't let it out. And Maleda, and neither could she give birth. That's one version. Msnita Tana in the Brisa we learned, and each version adds on another one. There was actually shtayim be'ish. There was two by men that was closed up, which was shich v'zera uketanim. The men could not emit their semen nor their urine. And shleisha be'isha, there was three things that were held in by by those organs by the woman, were shich v'zera, the semen, uketanim, and urination, beleda, and giving childbirth. Vinam, he says even more. He says shalish be'ish. There was three things by the orifice that was held back by a man, which was shich v'zera, semen, uketanim, urination, upitabas, by the anus, to relieve himself. And abba be'isha, and there was four by the woman, shich v'zera, semen, beleda, childbirth, ketanim, urination, upitabas, and to defecate. All those were clogged up because of Avimelech having taken tsar. Now the pasuk over there says, "Ki atza Hashem," because Hashem closed up bi'ad kol rechem, in place of all wombs. What's kol? So Rabbi Yana is coming to teach us afilah tarnagol shabes Avimelech. Even the hens, the chickens, by Avimelech's household, lo hitila beitzasa, did not lay its egg because every womb was closed up, every orifice of that region was closed up, even the chickens. Now, relating back to this idea of what's going on over here in this parasha of Avimelech, the Gemara brings a well-known teaching. Only Rabbi Baba Mari, and this actually Rabbi to Rabbi Mari gets us going through the whole Amid Beis regarding this idea of Menoha Milsa. From where do we know this idea? So in this context, it's the Amr Rabbanan that Rabbanan say. So he's going to be asking him all these things. From where do we know? Where do we know? Where do we know? And what's the Torah source? And as we know, everything licked in the Torah. So he's asking him, from where do we know this idea that the rabbis say, whoever beseech mercy for his friend, and you need it also, the one who davens for the other person is actually answered first for the fact that he davened for someone else. So Malay says to him, the Chassidus says the pasuk in Eiv. It says, Hashem shavesh shvus Eiv. Hashem returned the captives of Eiv. When he davened for his friend. So you see that because Eiv davened for his friend who needed the same thing, and he needed the same thing, he was answered first. So Malay, and that he said back to him, Atamet Mehasam, you saying from over there? Anam in Mahacha, I have an earlier source in the Torah. You have to come on to Nach. It's in the Torah, which is this pasuk that we had in our Mishnah. Vispal Avram Elikim. Avram davened to God, B'yirpa Elikim es Avimelech, and God healed Avimelech, Vasishta, and his wife, Amoisim, and his maidservant, etc. Now, it says later on, Vashem pokad es Sarah, and Hashem remembered Sarah kasha Amar v'Grema, like he had said. Now, kasha Amar Avram el Avimelech, as Rashi points out, it doesn't say vayifkoid es Sarah. It says pokad, which sounds like it already was, that she was remembered to have a child before Avimelech. All the wombs by Avimelech's household were closed up, and now they were able to have children. As Taisa points out, that we're not talking about pregnancy, because Malachim already had told Sarah from the previous Pesach. It's just that it was giving her the ability to give birth easily, like they davened for Avimelech. That was kasher. That was Hashem pakad. Hashem had remembered, meaning Avram, who davened for Avimelech's household, and he needed the same thing to be able to give birth. He was answered first. So this way you hit the source of the famous teaching. Now again, the Gemara continues with many interesting teachings with Amalei Rava l'Rabba Bar Mari. It's Rava asking Rabba Bar Mari, where do you know a certain idea? Rabba Mari is going to answer. Rabba's going to say, really? That's where you know it from? We know it from even earlier, as at least some of the teachings. So he asks him as follows: these are all from where do we know in the Torah these things that people say? Bahadi Hutzam, together with the thorns, Loki Kurava, the cabbage gets ruined. Meaning, the thorn that grows by the cabbages, when you're coming to tear out the thorns, sometimes you're going to pull out the cabbage with it. Comes out that the cabbage is going to get ruined, going to get hurt because of the thorns. In other words, the neighbors of the wicked get hurt with their wicked neighbors. So what's the source? Amalei said, it says the pasuk in Yomי, Lama terivu elai, why are you fighting with me? Kulchem peshatim b'num Hashem. Hashem says you all are negligent towards me. Now, that sounds like even the prophet who was saying this, Yirmiyah, Hashem is telling him also that you're also pasheya b'mi, even though he wasn't, but oilerasha oilershchena. Amalei, and that he said to him, Atam Mahasim, you say from there? I have a source earlier in Sefer Shemais. Hashem says, until when are you going to refuse to safeguard my mitzvahs and my Torahs? Now, that's Hashem telling Moshe and Aaron also, even though they kept the Torah, but Bahadi Hutzam, Laki Krava, the cabbage that grows near the thorns, is also uprooted with the thorns. Another teaching, Amalei Rava l'Rabba Bar Mari, says, it says in the pasuk in Bereshis, that when Yosef's brothers came down to Mitzrayim, it says in Mitzay Echav, from some of his brothers, Loka Chemisha Nashim, he took 5 men, and he brought them in front of Pari to see them. So asked Rabbi to Rabbi Bar Mari, Man ninu Chamisha, who are these 5 brothers? So Amalei said to him, Hochem and Birchen, this is what Rabbi Yechon says. It's Eisen Shahuchfulu B'Shemus. It's the brothers that their names are repeated when Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of the Torah benches them. We find Dan, Zvulun, Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. The pasuk is letting you know that these were the weakest of all the Shvatim, and they needed chizuk, they needed to be strengthened, and therefore their names were repeated to strengthen them. Those are the brothers that Yosef brought in front of Paroi, so that he shouldn't select them to be the generals and to make it too difficult for them, which Tosfos brings from Bereshis Rabbah. Some say the exact opposite, that the ones who were their names are doubled were the mighty ones, and that would answer the Gemara's next question, that Yehuda also had his name doubled. And that's what the Gemara is asking according to our Pshat and our Gemara, that those are the weakest. But Yehuda is a Ari, is a lion. He's definitely not from the weakest ones. So why was Yehuda's name doubled? Oh, Amalei says that's Lamil Sehudech, that's for a different reason. That's for its own specific reason why his name was doubled. A different Agadic teaching, which tells us and will explain why his name was doubled. That Maidich said, what does it mean the pasuk in Devarim? This is when Moshe Rabbeinu benched Klal Yisrael at the end of his life. Reuven should live and not die. He, Misav, Mispar, and his men should be counted. Bezois Yehuda, and this should be for Yehuda. Why does it flow from Reuven that he doesn't die and go into Yehuda? Yeah. So Kol Oisin Arbam Shana, Shayisrael B'Midbar, all the 40 years that the Jews were in the desert, the bones of Yehuda were rolling around in a coffin, meaning all the Shvatim, their bones were taken out of Egypt and were buried in Eretz Yisrael, like Yosef tells his brothers, you're going to take out my bones from here with you. Yosef was the first one to die of the brothers. Sounds like that their bones were also taken out, and he says, take mine out with you. And the only reason why it says that Yosef's bones were taken out was only to tell you the praise of Moshe Rabbeinu, that all the Jewish people were busy with taking the spoils of the Egyptians, taking all their money, and he was busy with a mitzvah. But all of their bones were taken out. Now, Yehuda's skeleton was not intact and connected. All the Shvatim, their tzaddikim, their bones were all intact, and their body was as it always was. Not Yehuda. Why? Because Yehuda took a cherem, an excommunication, that he said to Yaakov, if I don't bring you Binyamin back, I'll be a sinner for you all the days. Now, although the condition was fulfilled and he brought Binyamin back, the Gemara Malkas that Rav Beis teaches the curse of a sage, even if it was on condition, it still comes fulfilled. So Yehuda, although he fulfilled the condition, still he cursed himself, and he was in this nidui, in this excommunication. So his bones were rolling around the coffin. That Shabbat Moshe, this for 40 years. So Moshe came to beseech mercy at the end of his life. Amalaf Nabi said in front of Hashem, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the world, Mi garm LeReuben Sheyada, who caused to Reuben to admit what he had done with his father's bed? That was Yehuda. There's a Medrash in Tanchuma that says when Yehuda admitted about the story with Tamar, Sadka Mimeni, it's true, it was from me. So Reuben got up and he says, I went and I moved around my father's bed. Which Taisa says, even though the Medrash brings that Vayeshev Reuben al Abar, that when Reuben came back to the pit, that he wanted to see if Yosef was still in the pit, it comes to teach us that he came back from his sack and his fasting because he had moved around his father's bed, and that was before the story of Tamar. So what he's saying that he was like he had done tshuva only because of Yehuda, but he wasn't made berabim until after Yehuda was made. He says, okay, I line that the tshuva getin. But to get up there and say in front of the Hamoinam, say, yeah, I was with my daughter-in-law, I was the one to do. Wow, look at how you have the vulnerability to get up and say such a thing. Then Reuben says, you know what? Me too. I was also I moved around my father's bed, so that was all from Reuven. Oh, meaning it was all from Yehuda. So Yehuda has this big schus. Miyad Shama Hashem called Yehuda. So immediately Hashem heard the voice of Yehuda. That's why his name is repeated, to say this idea of Hashem hearing his voice. That's what Bezoisli Yehuda. What this is for Yehuda. What's for Yehuda? The schus. Yomer Shema Hashem called Yehuda, that Hashem should hear the voice of Yehuda. So again, that's the repetition, not because he needs the chizuk. So al evrei l'shafa. So his bones got reconnected. The clicks, went back into its place from where he was detached from. That was the first thing that happened. But they didn't let him up into the heavenly yeshiva. So that's what it continues over there. Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha. But to his people, he should be brought. Meaning the B'nai Teira in the Mesivta Shalmala. But he didn't know what the rabbis were saying. Well, the Mishkul and Mitrach Bad Rabban to discuss and to have part of the discourse. So you're the Ravle, Moshe Rabbeinu says. His hands should contend for him, Rav like fighting. So he could able to handle the Milchamta Shatera. Now, but he wasn't successful to say something that the halacha should be like him. So he was able to ask a good question in the shir, but it never came out that he was right. Moshe Rabbeinu continued davening ve'izah mitzav tiyah. Help from his adversary should be, meaning he should be able to be successful in his Torah discussions. And that's why his name was repeated. Now, continue on this theme of Amali Rabba Rabba Bamari, he says another question. Where do we know this thing that people say? Basar Anya, after the poor, Azlan the Yusa goes poverty, meaning poverty follows the poor person. The poor get poor, the rich get richer. Where do we know this from? So Amalei says that now we'll learn the Mishnah Masechta Bikurim. Interesting source. Ashirim, the wealthy, Mavin Bikurim, they bring. We know the halacha. If you have to bring the first fruits of Eretz Yisrael, they bring it b'klasit shel zav shel kesef. They bring it in golden and silver baskets. Now, Vanim, the poor who can't afford that, they bring it b'sali netzarim. They bring it with twigs, woven baskets shel arava klufa of this peeled willow. Now, hasalim b'bikurim noisim kahanim. So they give the baskets with the first fruits to the kahanim, but the wealthy wouldn't give their golden and silver baskets to the kayin. So we see that the poor get poorer, that not only are they given the bikucha, but they even lose their baskets. So Mali said to him, At Muhammad Hasam, this Rabbi keeps on asking him, and he keeps on saying, that's where you learn from? We learn that from an earlier source. We have actually a pasuk. You don't have to come on to a Mishnah. Let's continue Tamid Beis. What's the pasuk? Because by someone who has a negav tzaras, the pasuk tells us that the tamei yikra. He has to call out and say tamei, meaning it's not enough that he has a negav tzaras. It's that he has to embarrass himself. That the pasuk requires him to call out tamei. So you see that the poor get poorer, meaning the when it rains it pours. When it's bad it gets worse. That's you learn out from this source. Another teaching, Amalei Rabbi Bamari says, where do we know this thing that the rabbis say? Hashkim be'echel. Person should get up early and eat bekayetz in the summertime ne'achama because of the sun, because of the heat. B'chayif you should also eat early in the morning in the winter ne'atzin because of the cold. People say shitin the rohute rahut. 60 people could run, and they won't catch up with the person that ate a good breakfast. Get your Wheaties. This is you're not going to catch up with someone who had his big cereal in the morning. Where do we know this from? It says Gemara the Chsivk. It says a pasuk in Yeshaya. Lo yiravu. They won't be hungry. V'lo yismo. They won't be thirsty. V'lo yakum shecher v'shemesh. And the sun and the heat will not hit them. So you see, because they weren't hungry, because they weren't thirsty, like Mommy said, have a good breakfast, eat those eggs, eat that sandwich, and then you won't be in pain because of the hot and the cold that day. That's where we see that source from this pasuk in Yeshaya. It says, Atam Mahasam, you say from Yeshaya, I have a pasuk in Shemais. It says in the Torah, you're going to serve Hashem your God. What's that? Do Kriyishma Tefillah. That's obviously first saying Kriyishma davening. And then the pasuk says, and that you'll bless your bread and your water. That is bread with salt and a flask of water. And what does the pasuk say afterwards? Afterwards is I'll remove illness from you. So you see that it's important to, right after davening, have a good breakfast, a good tikkun, have something, and then Hashem removes the machla from your midst. Now, by the time I learn the brisa, actually machla, Hashem says I'm going to remove machla, illness from your midst. Zumara. It actually refers to the gallbladder. Why is it called machla? Because the gallbladder has 83 types of illnesses that could be. Machla begematria, and the numerical value of machla, 40 and 8 and 30 and 5, is the numerical value of 83. And all these illnesses that could affect the gallbladder, pas b'melech shachris, we know the famous term pas shachris, bread with salt in the morning, v'kitin shalmayim, and a flask of water, mavatlan, nullifies it. And therefore, again, you see how important it is to have that good breakfast and that heals this machla, these 83 illnesses that could happen from the gallbladder. Continuing with other teachings, Rabbi Bamari says, where do we know this thing that the rabbis say, or some girsayos on the side say it's not the rabbis, this is more Damri Inchi, this is again what people say. Chavrach kardiach chamara. If your friend calls you a donkey, uchafa legabeich moish. Take the saddle of the donkey and put it on you. And put it on your back. In other words, what he's trying to say is, admit to what he's saying and don't respond to him. Just accept what he's telling you. So Amalei, what's the source of this thing? In other words, don't fight with him. Like just take it when he's telling you this thing. The Chsivlik says pasuk in Bereshis. Yomer, and the Malach says, Hagar, Shivcha Sarai, the maidservant of Sarai. This is when she was chased out of the house, and the Malach meets Hagar, and says, "Where are you coming from? Where are you going?" But she says, "Yeah, because of Sarai, my mistress, the one who controls me, I'm running away from." Meaning, since the Malach called her a Shivcha, she took she's calling you a donkey. She took the saddle and put it on and says, "Yeah, Taka, ich bin." And this is Taka, she's Gewilti, she's my mistress. That's where I'm running away from. Another teaching, Amalei Rabba Rabba Bamari says, "Manana milsi damar inchi." From where do we know this thing that people say, "Milsa ganod ispech"? If there's something embarrassing about you, Kodem Amr, you say it first, which is the best thing. If a person learns how to do it, no one can get to you. You say, "Yeah, Taka, I'm like this." Yeah, like no one. You beat people to it. say I'm this, I'm that. People want to they want to catch you or something, or stump you or shame you. No, so you say it first. Where do we know this idea from? So Amalei says the chsiv is a pasuk in Bereshis. But Yomer and Eliezer said when he was there by Besuel and Eved Avram Alechi, I'm the servant of Avram. You can't he's not embarrassed anymore. He put it out there already. He already said I have this, I'm that, and there's no more room to be ashamed. Another teaching, Amalei Rabbi Mari said, where do we know this thing that people say? Shafel v'azel bar avza. Although the goose walks bent downward, however, ve'ene mitaifi, but its eyes are focused in the distance, meaning that it's looking for its food way off in the distance. That's the metaphor. What it means to say is because of the humility of a person, he shouldn't be embarrassed to ask what he needs, whether for learning Torah, whether for parnasa, whether to collect the debt, whatever it is. A person, you could be humble, but don't. But you could walk down with your head like a goose, but you could look like a goose looks with its eyes up. You could look to the far and try to get what you need. What's the source of that? Amalei dechsilik says in Shmuel Aleph. Ve'etiv Hashem la'adoini, and Hashem does good to my master. And you'll remember your maidservant. What's this context? So Rashi brings this is by Abigail. She was prophesying that her husband Novel was going to die. Now, in her words, she was alluding to David. He should remember her beauty. So although she was humble and walking, so to speak, with her head down, she was looking with her eyes to the future and hinting to David, saying, "Yeah, just remember me. My husband's going to die, and remember how beautiful I am. That David will want her as he did." Another teaching, Amalei Rabbi Bamari says, where's this thing that the people say that we know that Shitin Tichle, that 60 mornings and pain. The number 60, as Taisus brings, is generally an exaggeration. It's just it's a guzma, but 60 pains mati lakacha comes to the tooth. The kol chavre shama v'le'achol, that hears the sound of his friend eating, but he doesn't get to eat. I mean, this tooth, it's like metaphorical, but the tooth has 60 pains when it hears someone else and it can't eat. So Amalei Dechsiv, where do we know this source? It's a pasuk Malachim Aleph. Nasan HaNavi was telling David HaMelech, V'li, and to me, ani avdecha, me your servant, v'letzadik HaKayin, to tzadik the Kayin, v'lemniyah ben Yayada, v'leshlema avdecha, and to Shlema your servant, loy kara. It didn't call to. He was complaining that he wasn't invited to the festive to the festive meal. So you see that that this is painful when there is a party going on and you're not able to eat from the party. So Amalei said to him, "Atam Mahazam, that's your source." It says I can bring an earlier source, a pasuk in Bereshis. It says V'yivayu Yitzchak ka'aya l'sari imay, and Yitzchak brought his new wife to the tent of Sarah his mother. V'yikaches Rivka, and he took Rivka v'tilei leisha, and she was for him a wife. V'yaveha, and he loved her. V'yinochem Yitzchak achri imay, and Yitzchak was consoled after the loss of his mother. Now, Ksiv Basrei, and says after that Yitzchak took a wife, says after that V'yosef Avram. Avram added V'yikachish, and he also took a wife. Ushma Keturah, and her name was Keturah. So Rashi tells us that Avram, so to speak, was jealous of Yitzchak, because Yitzchak had a new wife. Avram also wanted one. So again, that's the same idea that when there's a party going on, it's painful when you're not invited to the party. The Gemara continues, Amalei Rabbi Amori, another teaching. But no, in the Milsa Damar, from where do we know this idea that people say, Chamra lemore, although the wine belongs to the king, to the master, Tivusa l'shake, the one who drinks it gives thanks to the butler, not to the king, to the waiter who's serving it says, "Oh, thank you very much." The waiter comes out. There's every chasna. There's, "Oh, thank you, waiter." He's just bringing out the trays, but you tell him thank you. But the one who's really the chef, the owner, the Baal Simcha, whatever it is, he doesn't get the shkayach. Where do we know this idea from? So on that, Amalei says the Chassidus says a pasuk Midbar. V'samachta es yodcha alav. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu that you will lean your hands on Yehoshua, And as the pasuk says, "Laman Yishmun," so that they'll hear, "B'yirun kol hadas b'nei Yisrael," and that all the assembly of Jewish people will see that this is being given over to Yeshua. Now, it says a pasuk in Devarim, Yeshua ben Nun, Malei Ruach Chachma. He was full with a spirit of wisdom. Why? Because Moshe leaned his hands on him. Yishmu love kol b'nei Yisrael, b'goyim, and all the Jewish people listened to him, etc. So what do you see from here? So Rashi tells us that the pasuk is making the greatness and the wisdom of Yeshua dependent on Moshe, as if he gave it to Yeshua. That's not true. It came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But chamr lemare, although the wine that is provided by the host, tivusil shakye, the thanks is given to the one who actually serves it. So although it's really coming from Hashem, the thanks, the shkoyach, is like given to Moshe Rabbeinu. This brings a different pshat. What this phrase chamr lemare tivusil shakye means. It means, in other words, that the one who's giving to drink gives generously to the one he wants to, like the Medrash brings, Toiv Ayin Hu Yevayrach, the one with a generous eye is the one who is blessed. That's referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him Samachta Yadcha, which is in the singular, put one hand on Yeshua, and he leaned both hands, Yadav, like the other pasuk we brought in Devarim. So that is telling us that that the one who's the Chamr Lemare, the wine belongs to the master, but the Vus L'Shake, the one who's pouring, like the master tells him, like the Baal Simcha tells him, says, "Do me a favor, give everyone a little bit of wine." And the guy who's pouring pours a big cup. That's the teaching of Chamr Lemare. But the Vus L'Shake, the shkoyach goes to the one who's pouring because he says, give me a little, fill it up, put it up to the top. I want to see it overflowing, That's Moshe Rabbeinu that Hashem told him, put one hand, and then he put both hands. So very different interpretations of what this aphorism of Chamr Lemare Tevus L'Shake. Now the Gemara continues with the next teaching. Amalei Rabba Rabba Bamari says, from where do we know this thing? The people say, Kalba Bekafne, when the dog is hungry, Gololi Mivla, he'll swallow stones. That's one interpretation. Rashi makes another one that Gololi we know means Gololim, means animal dung. But he says the first pshat is right because Gololim is normal for a dog. But that's why we always say that the dog, dogs, they go and they eat their own excrement. So that's not even a chiddush. That's not like, he's so hungry, he's eating that. He's normal. But we're saying that even if the dog's hungry, he'll eat stones. Where do we know that from? The Siva says a pasuk in Mishlei. Very important pasuk. Nefesh Seveya, the satisfied soul, Tavis Neifis, will trample the honeycomb. The Nefesh Re'eva, but the starving soul, Kol Mar Masak, whatever is bitter is sweet. Meaning when a person is satisfied, when a person is happy, so even sweet things, it doesn't need. It doesn't tempt him. But when a person is he's hungry, he's empty, then even something that's bitter is sweet to him. So the starving dog will eat stones, meaning a person in his life will consume terrible content because he's just starving. The person is satisfied. It's not a challenge for him. It's not a difficult thing. Another teaching, Amalei Rava, the Rabbi Bar Mari, he says, where this thing that we know that regarding people, that people say, Mitayel v'ozl diklabisha, the bad palm tree goes gabekina deshrachi by the trees that produce no fruits. In other words, it's normal for a bad palm tree to grow on the side of a barren tree. That's the metaphor. But obviously, it means to say that he's hanging out by the lowlives. So where do we know this from? Amalei, it's written in the Torah. Shan Nevim, it's repeated in the prophets. It's a third time in the writings. Utnam Besnim, we learned in the Mishnah. Utnina B'Braisa, and we learned in the Braisa. Okay, that's a whole long list. So where do we find this? It's written in the Torah. So it's Sabas and Bereshis. Esav goes to Yishmael. You see that the weak date tree is growing near the barren trees. Shalom and Nevi'im, it's learned in the prophets. Tachsiv, it says a pasuk in Shaftim. Yislaktu el Yiftach anashim reikim, that they gathered to Yiftach, the empty people. But Yimai, they were with him. So again, the weak date tree is near the barren trees. Meshul's B'Ksuvim, it's said a third time in the writings, which Taisa points out this is not B'Ksuvim. It's actually, he says maybe it's from Sefer ben Sira. Sefer ben Sira was one of the earlier parcolific, whatever word that is, the type of writings that they had. He was an individual who wrote insightful teachings, but it's not really from the Ksuvim. The Ksuvim says a pasuk from Ben Sira, Kol oif lemina yishkoin. All birds to their species will dwell, uvnei adam l'daimaloi, and people to those that are similar to them. So again, like you attract the type of crowd that you are, and therefore the weak palm tree is having these barren trees near it. And Tznan Mesnitin, we learned it in a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah Masechtas Kalim in Perik Tabas Adam. The Mishnah there is talking about regarding the hooks of a tray or of a table. Those hooks are tamei, but of, let's say, a wooden menorah, the hooks are tar. What's the difference? So the Mishnah says that the rule is like this: whatever's connected to something that's tamei is tamei. Tar, whatever's connected to something that's tar is tar. So these hooks are like metal nails that are made like a fork, which you hang the animal on it at the time when you're skinning it, and it's stuck into the wall. Like the Gemara says in Pesachim that they had these iron hooks that were stuck into the beams that they had. And if it's stuck into a wooden menorah, now a wooden menorah is what's called pshuti kli'etz. It's a smooth wooden vessel, which is not makabel tumah. So the nail is secondary in bottle to that, so it's not makabel tumah, even if tumah touches it. But regarding a tray or regarding a table that's makabel tumah, so the nail that's attached to it, the hook, is also makabel tumah. So that's the idea of mechuber l'tamei tamei mechaber. But the point is teaching the moral lesson of if you're connected to tahar people, you're tahar. If you're mechuber to tamei, you're tamei. So if you're around these barren trees, even though you have dates coming out of your tree, it's a pretty weak one, and it's a pretty negative sign about you that this is what you're connected to. And Matan Brisa, we learned this in the Brisa. He says, "Loy lechinam." It's not for nothing. Halak zarzel etzel erev. That the starling, which is a type of bird, goes to the raven. Why does it hang around the raven? Because it's the same species, which Rashi points out. Rabbi Eliezer holds zarzer is a type of a non-kosher bird. Rabbanan disagree in Mesech Chulin Nadav Samachem et Alf. Rabbi Eliezer says, "I'll show you," because the raven is not kosher, and the reason why the starling hangs around it is because it's from the same type of species. So again, you see, it's a sign about what type of person you are. Another teaching, from where do we know this thing that people say? Kodis chavrach. If you call your friend to rebuke him, and he doesn't answer you, so you block him. Remei guda rabba shadebe. So what you do is you throw the wall on him. In other words, leave him. Let him fall in his wickedness. Push him away with your hands. That's what people say. So where do we know this from? So Malay says a pasuk in Yecheskel. Yan tihartich. Behold, I made you tahar. Like tahartim mitamasech, and you didn't purify yourself from your tamah. That's it. You're not going to be tahar anymore. So if you try calling your friend and rebuking him and telling him, say, "No, I don't feel it," and he doesn't respond, that's it. Ghost him, block him, whatever. I'm saying, throw the wall on him. Let him, go die, and in your wickedness. Another teaching, Amalei Rabba Rabba Barmari says, from where do we know this thing that people say? Beira de shasis mine, the pit that you drank from, you already drank from it when you were thirsty. Leitishti beikala. Don't throw like a clump of earth into the pit. In other words, what it means to say is something that you once needed. So don't degrade it now. Like, oh, you don't need it anymore, and now you're just gonna ruin it. How do we know this? So Amalei says the Chsibit says the person Devarim. Like the Tav Adoimi, don't abominate the Edomite, Kiachichu, because he's your brother, he's from Esav, who's the brother of Yaakov. Like the Tav Mitzri, and don't abominate the Egyptian, Kiger Yisab, because you were a resident in his land. So you once used the Egyptian land, so don't be Matab, don't abominate him. So you see that something you once had benefit from, don't disgrace it now that you don't need it anymore. Another teaching, Amalei Rabba Rabba Bamari, he says, Non milsi the amr inchi. From where do we know there's thing that people say? Idalis dura. If you pick up a load with me, this is what one person is telling another one. If you assist me in carrying this load, delina, then I'm going to lift it. But if not, loy delina, I'm not going to lift it. So this is like a mashal that a person doesn't want to enter into the danger of a risky proposition and to take responsibility for something. Unless someone comes in and does it with me, you hear this all the time for businesses or leadership or community things. I'm not doing this myself. If someone wants to come and join me and help me, I'm going to do it. And you have many people that, emotionally can't do it on their own. They say, look, if someone wants to do it with me, I'll do it. But by myself, I can't do it. Where do we know this from? Somebody says, the Chsibit says a pasuk in Sefer Shoftim. Yomei leha Barak, and Barak said to the Vaira, Im telchi imi v'halachti. If you go with me, then I'll go. If you don't go with me, I'm not going to go. Meaning, I can't do it myself. If someone's going to join me, I'll do it. I'll start this organization. I'll take on this meeting. But if not, I can't do it myself. Another teaching, Amalei Rabbi Mamari says, "B'nana milsi." From where do we know this thing that people said kadavin and zutri? When we were younger, lagavri, we thought we were men. We thought we were powerful. We were teenagers. We had our sleeves rolled up and we had the hair slicked back. We thought we were big. Hashta de kashishna. Now that we're actually old, ladardiki, we're low like little children. Where do we know this thing from? Somebody says because Meikarik originally says in Sefer Shemais, Hashem hoylech lefneim yoimam. Hashem went in front of them during the daytime, ba'amad anan, in the cloud, in the pillar of the cloud, lanchais maderech, to lead them on the road. V'laylo ba'amud eish lahar lehem, and at nighttime was a pillar of fire to illuminate for them. That was in the beginning. We thought we were great. We had Hashem, the Amar Eish, Amar Anan. And Seif said, what does it say later on, as we continue to have Tzadikim Levanelef, behold, I'm going to send an agent, a shliach in front of you, l'shmorch b'derech, to safeguard you in the road. So we thought we were so great when we were younger, we respected. Now that we're old, we're treated as children that we're not even getting Hashem anymore. We're not even getting the Amud Eish. We're getting just a malach in front of us. Another teaching, the Gemara continues, is Amalei Rabba Rabba Ba'amari said, "No, the Milsi Damrinchi. Where do we know this thing that people say Basar Mori Nichsi? After the man of the assets, Tzivi Meshaych. That Tzivi is like a word of the fat. That you draw the fat, meaning that if you hang around a wealthy person, you'll also get maybe some fringe benefits from hanging around such a person." So Malay says the Chsibit says the pasuk, "V'gam la'loit ha'hoylech as Avram." Also, loit who followed after Avram. He also had the cattle and the flock and tents. And so you see that, as Rashi tells us in Bereshit, who caused Lot to have all this wealth? By going with Avram, you hang around the right jet, you might actually get something. So that's what is teaching us. Thank you for hosting us.